This is Taking Stock on Bloomberg. I'm Pimm Fox. My guest, Mike Green. He is a turnaround specialist who takes a, well, maybe you call it a tough love approach to fixing some distressed companies. Questions which ones, which industries are most at risk, and what kinds can stand the best chance of surviving. Mike Green is the CEO of Tenex Capital. Mike, it's good to have you. Thanks very much for coming in.
Nice to be back.
You know, in just the brief conversation that we had prior to you coming on the show one day, we were talking about some of the criteria for the things that you look for in companies that you then say, great, those are good turnaround candidates. And one of them, I was shocked. You said you like having unions in companies. Why is that?
Yes, we do. Well, obviously, management has an easier hand if there isn't an organized bargaining unit. But many situations when management has had that chance to already surface that value, you can't take advantage of that value in a distressed environment. What do I mean by value? Organized labor are one of the first people that want to support you in a turnaround. They have jobs at stake. We have money at stake. They have jobs at stake, livelihood. And if they really feel that what you're proposing to do is not all on their backs, if the concept of fairness applies, if they believe that what you're trying to do doesn't make them make all the sacrifices, but all the other counterparties will do it, they're one of the first people to step up. What they don't like to do is a give back when nobody else is giving back, and many times that's what happens. So not by themselves, the unions, but if everybody else is contributing, they like to contribute.
All right, so you've got unions as part of the mix. The other part was you like industries with like machinery, with heavy capital-intensive things that have already sucked in a lot of capital spending on someone else's part.
Right, and again, one of the things you need to look for if a company is struggling is how do you end the struggle? How do you resurface the company? How do you make the company perform better? If they don't have any assets left, if they were an asset-light company, somebody that really doesn't have machines or trucks or rail cars or any types of assets, you really can't use that to raise capital. Companies that are heavily capital intensive, you can slow down or go on a holiday of capital spending and create take some of the uses of working capital and turn them into sources of working capital during the turnaround phase. So one of the things we try to get them to understand is that you don't fix a company all at once. You go in several phases. The first phase is to really try to stop the cash burn. And as soon as you stop the cash burn, kind of like an emergency room in a hospital, you need to do the transfusion. The transfusion should come from money that you already have, not from third-party lenders or banks or customers. It should come from working capital that's trapped inside your company, and capital-intensive companies many times have working capital trapped in the company. And
talk about this whole idea of working capital, because indeed you were talking about some experiences that you had in the aviation industry where you learned that in different countries, I think it was Brazil, but in different countries they have a very different attitude towards working capital, and indeed they might be a little bit more efficient in the way that they use working capital.
Pimm, you have a great memory. When we spoke about that last time, a lot of people don't pick up on it as quickly as you do. But in the U.S. and in Great Britain and many of the big, sophisticated, very efficient banking countries, it simply wasn't worth learning efficient working capital skills when you could borrow money at 5 or 6% from the bank and accelerate everything else. In countries where the banking systems aren't as efficient, working capital is critical. It's life and death. And the example we made in Brazil that we told you about last time was a manager of a factory in Brazil knows that every 3 or 4 years the banks may tighten up. He cannot be dependent on getting cash from a bank when they're going to shut down. It's new to us here, what's happened in the last 2 years. So in those countries, people are very efficient with working capital. We say time is money. They say money is time. They'd rather take longer to make an aircraft or a car if it uses less working capital. A North American manager would never think that way. So we try to bring those working capital skills that you would get in second-tier economies to bear in the U.S., especially when companies are struggling. The banks don't want to give you more money because you don't qualify for it. So let's try to find a way to be more efficient with our working capital. Look at the charts of accounts that you spend money on and see if during the reform period of 4 quarters or so when you're trying to turn the company around, you don't fix them in 4 quarters, but you can turn it around and change some of the habits if you can surface your own cash and make do with yourself, and that's how you build consensual approaches that really avoid using the bankruptcy courts.
Do you also think, and we're going to continue the conversation, we're going to take a break, but do you also think that one of the issues is that people try to shoot for the moon all the time? They don't necessarily try to make just incremental improvements. They want to make it the best company ever, when in fact just making something average wouldn't be such a bad thing.
Well, that's also very insightful. Everybody wants to do 2 things. They want to become great when they're really not even average, and they want to do it all at once. You can't do either. The first thing you need to recognize is that statistically, most of us are average. Most companies are average. Over 50% of the Gaussian is average.
You're not average. All right,
We're all average.
You're definitely not average.